Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all. As one of the commentators say, freaking heck, here we go again. Yes, here we go again, guys. Neocon Senators, and unfortunately from the both political parties in the Democrats and the Republicans, are calling on President Joe Biden for hard-hitting action against Iran. What could go wrong, right? Hit Iran, start a regional war. Even one of the politicians in the United States, who is a candidate, by the way, I'm going to show you the video later, she says that we have to hit Iran to prevent war, which means it seems that bombing nowadays can prevent wars, according to the American logic, and according to these politicians who have close ties to the military-industrial complex, close ties to the military contractors, and close ties to the bankers and the deep state, and they have an invested interest in flaring the fires all around the world so that they can make profits while we, the people in the Middle East, get killed, and the American people who will be sent to the Middle East to get killed, right? The poor people, the middle class people, the working people, the people who cannot generate enough money, they will be dead, because the rich, they will have their bunkers, they will have their flights, and they will go all around the world. And the proof, one of the proofs, let's say, it's not a conclusive proof, but if you remember in yesterday's live streaming, I showed you a 5 minutes video. I explained to you what are the American forces doing in Syria, right? How the regime change war started, how it developed, and what is the position of the American forces in Syria, and what is their strategy. And I posted this video on X, formerly known as Twitter, after the editing, the background music, and the graphics, etc., yesterday at 8 p.m. Central European time. And I wrote, "Dear American friends, the US forces are in Syria to protect the interests of the tiny elites in Washington and not to fight terrorism as your officials claim. They are in the Middle East to destabilize the region and sell weapons to the conflicting parties. Some even say they are there for the sake of Israel. The people in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, and in Iran are not your enemies. Your enemies are psychopaths like Lindsey Graham and his friends in the military-industrial complex who are pushing for war with Iran and starting World War III with Russia." And I posted this yesterday, actually at 10 p.m. Central European time. So less than 24 hours later, the video got over 250,000 views, 261,000 views as we speak now on X. So if you want to share this video more, I have a goal, let's say, to reach it to 500,000 views. Go to my X account. My name is already here on the screen, as you can see, Kevork Almassian. And I would really appreciate it if you can repost this video, especially if you're an American. We want more people in the United States to know that we are friends and we don't want to kill each other. Those are the politicians sending soldiers to the region, and they could come back in coffins, right? We don't want that. Nobody wants to kill American soldiers. Nobody wants to kill American citizens. These soldiers are coming to the region, and if they bomb Iran, of course, more American soldiers will die. This is the unfortunate truth about this case, right? So in today's live streaming, I'm going to address the Neocon Senators' call on Biden for hard-hitting action against Iran. I'm going to show you how I think this was in 2018 or 2020 when Trump was president and he was in a similar situation with Iran. Biden criticized him for flaring up the fires in the region. So I will show you the hypocrisy about that. And nowadays, the United States says that they have mistaken the drone which attacked them on the borders between between Jordan and Syria, and they thought it was an American drone. Do you really buy into that, guys? I will also explain why I think it's a BS argument. And since the US according to the spokesperson of the US administration, they don't know if Iran is directly behind this attack. Could it be that the attack was a false flag attack to cause a regional war? We have to also address that. And then I will show you how the neocons are pushing Biden for regional war and what options do Biden have on the table, because the military, the intelligence and the security, what do they say? The intelligence community, they are putting some options on the table so that Biden will have to pick one of these options now. And what could be the response of Iran if Iran was directly attacked by the American forces in the region? So let's start with the Biden when he was not the president of the United States, and he was criticizing Trump in 2020 when he called that Trump was so dangerous, he was worried he would get the US into a war with Iran. Take a look.
The world has changed because of what Trump has done. And the American people, including independents and some Republicans, know how bad he is, know how much he's misrepresented, know how he's getting close to getting us in a war. I said, as the walls close in on this man, I'm worried he's going to get us to war in Iran. Unfortunately, I may have been right. The fact of the matter is there's a lot at stake in this election. The world has changed.
Guys, do you realize that Biden only 3-4 years ago, he still had the capacity to speak and explain things? The man's mental capacity has drowned drastically in the past 4 years, and I don't really think that this guy is in charge anymore in 2024. And I don't think that he's taking decisions anymore. He's not really capable of taking decisions or knowing all the details of what's going on around the world. This is just me, in my humble opinion. After following so many statements and the mental gymnastics that he do when he is giving a speech and when he doesn't know where to walk, and those are not really silly things. Those are really, the body language can show you how the person thinks and his linguistic skills. And there's so many reports also say that the guy is taking, getting his necessary injection so that he can keep himself straight when he has to give a statement or a press conference, etc., etc. Now, the difference between Trump and Biden, like the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats under Obama, they thought that they have to neutralize, like make Iran neutral in the region. Therefore, they striked this deal, the what we say, the nuclear deal with the Iranian side. And this was a very good deal for Iran, for the United States, for the Europeans. And Iran has cooled down its, let's say, struggle of power in the region, with the United States. And they started to deal, and some of the frozen assets were unfrozen. And Iran was promised to be part of the international community, or to be, at least not to be sanctioned, right? Then Trump came and he just canceled this deal. And Iran accelerated its nuclear program, accelerated its, let's say, expanding its influence in the region through its allies, with its partners, with its friends, and now striking strategic deals with Iran, with China. And there would also be soon a military pact between Iran and Russia. Iran will join the BRICS. Iran will join the Shanghai organization, and there will be the deals that have been struck between China and Iran on an economic level is going to put Iran in a very good position, negotiating position and economic position. It's going to have, Iran is simply going to grow in the region. And this is, if anyone has to blame itself, it's the United States. If anyone has to blame itself, is the people in Washington, D.C. who listened to Benjamin Netanyahu, who told them that this nuclear deal has to be reversed, and they canceled it. So if anyone was worried about the Iranian influence in the region, speaking about the Americans, now they have to deal with the problem that they have put themselves in. They could have gained Iran as a neutral power in the region and not as an enemy. And now, after what's happening in the Gaza Strip, you can see that Iran is emboldened. Iran is helping more powers in the region, and more American assets are coming under attack by the allies of Iran. So the question here is Iran giving orders to the allies to strike American assets in the region? This is a very good question. I don't know the answer. I truly believe that the Ansarullah movement, Hezbollah, and other allies in the region of Iran are allies and partners and not proxies like the American press tries to portray them, because a proxy means that the Iranians will tell like the Ansarullah to do something which serves Iran and this step doesn't necessarily mean serves the interests of the Yemenis. But the Yemenis, when they take a step to protect their own interests first, and even if they are partners with Iran, then I can see that this step could be considered in favor of the Yemenis first and before the Iranian ones. So long story short, I think the hypocrisy between the Democrats and the Republicans is really it's scandalous. You know, both sides have their own warmongering people, and both sides have their ties with the military-industrial complex, and both sides fantasizing about wars in different parts of the world. Some want war with China, some want war with Iran, some want war with Russia, but all sides agree that there has to be war so that the economy could function, and not the economy that the American people are benefiting from, but the economy that is financing the pockets of the decision makers and the people who are behind the decision makers, right? So now the Americans say that they have mistaken, and the drone attack that happened against the American forces were mistaken, that it was an American drone. This is the Association Press. Enemy drone that killed U.S. troops in Jordan was mistaken for a U.S. drone, preliminary report suggests. U.S. forces may have mistaken an enemy drone for an American one and let it pass unchallenged into a desert base in Jordan, where it killed 3 U.S. troops and wounded dozens more, officials said Monday. Details of the Sunday attack emerged as President Joe Biden faced a difficult balancing act, blaming Iran and looking to strike back in a forceful way without causing any further escalation of the Gaza conflict. As the enemy drone was flying in at a low altitude, a U.S. drone was returning to the small installation known as Tower 2022, according to a preliminary report cited by 2 officials who were not authorized to comment and insisted on anonymity. As a result, there was no effort to shoot down the enemy drone that hit the outpost. This is the report of the Association Press. I will just play it here. Today, the internet is really like I'm living in Germany and still. Anyways, now it works.
U.S. officials are giving new details about that deadly drone strike on that base in Jordan that killed 3 American troops. Now, they say this enemy drone may have been able to strike the base because they were expecting another American drone to come in and land at the same time. The air defenses got confused and didn't open fire, mistaking that enemy drone for the American one. Now, this attack targeted a base called Tower 22, which is on the Jordanian-Syrian border. It supplies special operation forces and others who are in Syria as part of their America's anti-Islamic State fight. But this attack has raised concerns about wider tensions escalating in the Middle East amid Israel's war on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Already, we've seen so-called Iranian proxy forces launch attacks amid this war, blaming directly on the conflict. They include Lebanon's Hezbollah militia, which has been lobbing missiles into northern Israel. They include Yemen's Houthi rebels, who have been attacking ships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, a crucial trade route for cargo and energy shipments going from the Middle East and Asia onward to Europe. And now we're also seeing these attacks by Iranian-backed militia groups in both Syria and Iraq, targeting American bases and positions in those countries. Now, this attack in Jordan marks the first time that we've seen any attack on U.S. personnel in Jordan. Analysts say that this potentially widens the risk for American troops in other countries in the Middle East. It also raises a concern about what the American response would be. So far, US President Joe Biden has said that there will be a retaliatory strike. He's not given any other information about what that could entail, but it all comes as the wider Middle East is still upset about the Israeli war in the Gaza Strip that's killed over 26,000 Palestinians and continues to set just tensions even higher in the region. An American strike could see Iranian forces targeted, more of these militia groups targeted, but regardless, it just comes amid all these other wider concerns in the region, and it could escalate wider into a regional war.
So, I have read some of your comments, guys. I want to make also my comment. I know that you are discussing about Larry Johnson's conclusions. If this was a drone attack, right? First of all, I want to see the evidence of the drone attack, the particulars of the drone, and I want to see the origin of the drone, right? It's easy for the Americans to show the evidence that this was an Iranian drone attack if it was manufactured by Iran or supplied by Iran to any of the groups in the region that are backed by Iran. Easy. Secondly, if this was a drone attack, this is not some sort of a small kamikaze like this size of drone, right? It should be a big drone carrying a big amount of explosives, because the number of the casualties, 3 deaths, and we have many injured American soldiers, indicate that the amount of explosion is not small, right? So if this was a drone attack and it was an Iranian drone, there is no way for the Americans to confuse between an Iranian drone and an American drone, even if both of them were landing together, because each one of them has its own technology, has its own radar system, has its own GPS system, has its own serial numbers, and there is someone is watching when the drones are coming and landing or flying, departing from this military post. Therefore, if this was a drone and it was an Iranian drone, or let's say manufactured in Iran, right? And it was carrying huge, big explosions, and this drone came and exploded in the on American forces, I truly do not think that they have mistaken it. Like maybe it was hacked, I don't know. But I truly do not believe that an Iranian manufactured, made in Iran drone can just come and bomb American forces, and the Americans would mistaken it with US drones. They could probably not see it, but you cannot come and tell me that they have mistaken it with American drones. So the second scenario here that some of you were mentioning, is it maybe a rocket attack, maybe a missile attack? I don't know. I haven't seen an evidence for that, right? If the Americans don't want to show us the evidence to the world, to the journalists, then we will not know it. So this could be a false flag attack. There is always now the chance that this could be a false flag attack to drag Washington into retaliation against Iran. Now you can see all of a sudden, all these neocons are exerting huge pressure on Biden to bomb Iran directly. This will cause regional war for sure. If they bomb Iran, it's going to be hell on earth. But will Biden do that? And before that, does the American administration even know if Iranians were behind this attack directly? Like, this is the Pentagon spokesperson, and she admits that the Biden administration has no evidence.
Just to follow up, you said Iran was behind the attack. What does that mean? Have you seen evidence of financing or directing anything specific to this attack? Not just generally, but specifically.
So maybe I need to clarify further from what Lita had mentioned. We know that Iran funds these groups like Kataib Hezbollah. We know that these IRGC-backed militias are the ones responsible for attacks on our troops in Iraq and Syria. Beyond that, we're doing an intelligence assessments. We don't have, I can't give you today that
This attack linking it to Iran.
we just know that Iran funds these groups like Kataib Hezbollah and other groups that have attacked our forces, but I don't have more to share on that.
You're saying, right?
As a general matter, yes. Idris.
So as a general matter, she knows, or the administration knows, or the Pentagon knows that this Kataib Hezbollah of Iraq, they are supported by Iran. But they don't know if this Kataib Hezbollah of Iraq is if Iran has told the Kataib Hezbollah of Iraq to wage this attack against the American forces. So they don't know if Iran is directly behind it. Just like when October 7 attacks happened, Israel tried to link it to Iran, but even the intelligence community in the United States, they concluded that Iran had no clue and they didn't know about this attack, right? And this could be a similar case. If it was a drone attack and there is no false flag attack in this case, then probably Iranians didn't know about it because the Iraqis can operate such drones because Iran is selling them drones, right? Selling similar drones to Syria, like imagine that Iran is selling drones nowadays to Russia and the Russians are using it in Ukraine. And now the Ukrainians say this is an Iranian-backed aggression on me. I mean, the same thing can apply on the Americans because American weapons are being used by Israel, right? But Israel is not called like U.S.-backed militia or U.S.-backed proxy or etc. etc. Anyways, I was watching Judge Napolitano, Ray McGovern yesterday. One of you guys told me that he is watching the live streaming with him. And this is just, I will show you just 1 minute segment of this interview with him. He is a former CIA officer, right? And he says that there is a 50-50 chance that this was a false flag attack.
I mean, could this have been, I suppose the answer before I even say what I'm asking is yes, because anything is possible. Is it probable that this was a false flag, either by the Israelis or the Americans, or some entity wanting to start a war there and make it look like someone else's fault?
Well, if you look at cui bono, I mean, it was very clear. Even the New York Times about 10 days ago said the president is really interested in making sure that we prevail there. And if an American soldier is killed, well, then, okay. So the warning was there. Whether it was a false flag or not, I give it a 50-50 chance. As you know, Judge, I've been thinking that the Israelis will resort to this in any case, and they would be supported by that part of the coterie in Washington that we rightly call the neocons, the people who see no difference between the interests of Israel, and the interests of Israel are paramount right now, and the interests of the United States. So I don't know the answer. CENTCOM does. I just hope and pray, hope against hope, that the analysis will come up and not be doctored this time and not be used as a casus belli to go after Iran.
So there is a 50-50 chance, according to a former CIA officer, that this could be a false flag attack. And if it's a false flag attack, then it could be Israel, and behind Israel, the neocons in Washington, D.C., who see no difference between the interests of the United States and the interests of Israel. And the proof of that is what's happening in the Gaza Strip right now. Before I continue this live streaming with you guys, I want to thank you all for tuning into today's live streaming. And I would really appreciate if you could hit the like button as you are watching this live streaming. It really helps me with the algorithm of YouTube, and it pushes the content to more people to watch this content now, live, and later when it is posted. So the neocons and the war hawks in Washington, D.C. are calling for war with Iran. Let's go and bomb Iran, guys. This is what the neocons and the neoconservatives are calling. U.S. hawks demand war with Iran after attack on American troops in Jordan. Of course, it was in Syria, according to my sources as well. War hawks in the United States wasted no time agitating for direct military conflict with Iran after a drone attack on a military base just inside Jordan's border with Syria on Sunday killed 3 American troops and injured dozens more. Both Republican and Democratic members of Congress called on U.S. President Joe Biden to quickly respond with strikes inside Iran, which denied any connection to Sunday's attacks. There are so many examples here that he is mentioning. Contrary to the growing calls for a military response to attacks on US troops, analysts and progressive lawmakers have argued that the only way to halt the escalating violence in the region is to secure a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, where Israeli forces armed by the US have killed more than 26,000 people in less than 4 months. The Biden administration has repeatedly stonewalled international efforts to secure a ceasefire. This is a very good video here. I don't know why it's not appearing right now. I wanted to show you a video here, actually. Let me see if it's now here. Cool.
As you've seen and as we've set up in the introduction there, Matt, the calls for striking Iran directly are growing. We're hearing that from Republican lawmakers. We're also hearing it from some military experts in Washington who are not in the military, but certainly outside, and provide commentary saying the U.S. should consider targeting Iran directly, maybe even going after vessels, Iranian vessels. Would that work, given the fact that these organizations, these militants that were responsible for, these militias, I should say, responsible for what we're seeing in Jordan, perhaps even the Houthis, are not directly linked to Iran, or maybe we don't know if they were tactically given an order from Iran to carry out this attack?
Right. Well, no, in any situation like this, especially one where there's Americans have lost their lives, you're going to see the usual voices in Washington from the kind of foreign policy, national security priesthood singing the same hymns about how we need to respond with strength, we need to restore deterrence. These are all the various kind of expressions of faith that the Washington foreign policy establishment espouses. But let's remember, this is what the United States has been doing for literally decades in this region, responding to violence with more violence, escalating violence, trying to control the violence. And it has not worked. I mean, we saw the statement from Donald Trump in response to the attacks. Let's remember, 4 years ago, Trump assassinated the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani. And in response to that, Iran responded by attacking the al-Assad air base in Iraq with ballistic missiles that gave traumatic brain injuries to some 100 American service members. It did very little, if anything, to actually deter Iran, even in the short term. Certainly, we can see it has done nothing to deter Iran in the longer term. Maybe we should try a different approach right now with Iran and its partner groups, but also let's look at the source of this current unrest, and that is Gaza. Until we are really willing to bring pressure to bear to end this conflict and to get desperately needed humanitarian aid to Gaza's people, this will only get worse.
Yeah, maybe the United States has to try something else nowadays instead of just using force to deter Iran. Maybe they should try diplomacy. Maybe they should learn how diplomacy works. And maybe they should go back to the 70s when the Americans were engaged in some sort of diplomacy in the region, right? Or learn from the Chinese nowadays, who are striking deal after deal in the region, in the Middle East, West Asia, in Latin America, in different parts of the world. And to answer to your question, my friend, has the King of Jordan made any statements regarding this attack? Personally, I didn't see him personally making statements. However, I saw the Jordanian government statement in Arabic, and they denied that this attack happened on Jordanian soil. Maybe they are embarrassed. They don't want to say it was on Jordanian territory, or maybe the Americans are embarrassed to say it was on a Syrian territory. But my sources in Syria say, and this is a journalistic source, according to a colleague and a friend in Syria who covered the Syrian war extensively in the past years, and he was a war correspondent, he said the attack was on the Syrian side of the border. So I do believe him, and I take what the Americans say in this regard with a grain of salt. And yesterday I explained in length in the past live streaming why the Americans do not want to tell the world that they are on Syrian soil at the moment. And beside the neocon hawks who are senators nowadays, we have this lady who is the candidate, Nikki Haley. She says she calls for bombing the leadership of Iran, which she says would prevent war. Classic example of the warped, inverted logic of interventionists and deterrence fetishists who always try to claim that dropping bombs is actually a genius war prevention strategy. Bro, I just have a theory, really. Like there is a trend of pushing and promoting the most incompetent, unskilled, low IQ level people to become politicians in the West. Like there is a conspiracy, against Western people. Like the other day I was telling a friend, I said, pick any foreign minister in this so-called civilized world, from the United States, from Berlin, from Paris, from these countries, right? And send the foreign minister to the backwards countries, like they call us backwards, right, in the Middle East, and just do a competence test about international law, diplomacy, international relations, political science, linguistics, some common knowledge, history, geography, with pick any foreign minister in the Arab world and let them do together a competence test. You will see big difference in the level of knowledge and the difference in the IQ levels. I cannot believe a person like herself. I'm not talking about genders here, guys. Like when I say her or whatever persons, like a woman like herself can become a candidate. But my theory is those who are promoting Nikki Haley and people who are close to the establishment, they want people who are incompetent like herself to be in a position of power. They're easy to be under control. And they don't want someone like, and I'm not defending Trump, but they don't want someone like Trump who is stubborn and not really easy to be under control. People nowadays, like I have a feeling like whoever is selecting these people is like mocking the Western people and telling them, look, you're in my pocket. I control every aspect in your lives. And I will put a mockery as a leader of you, and I will laugh at you more and more and more. Like there is no way like someone like her can become a president, right, of the United States, let alone any other country. The United States is the biggest country in the world, or the strongest country in the world. And she's calling to be tough. Like if you are tough with Iran, then Iran will be deterred. Lady, this is not the 1990s. It's not 2003. It's not even 2011. In 2024, with the confession of Western journalists who write in mainstream media outlets like The Guardian, Iran is the biggest power in the region nowadays. And we're not talking about the size of the military. We're talking about the size of the influence in the region. And Iran is a very big country in the region. It's an over-regional, like beyond regional country nowadays. And it's a very important for Russia and very, very important for China as well. Therefore, these tactics, intimidation, and like we have to play tough to this and that, it's not going to work with Iran. And I'm not talking wishful thinkings. I'm explaining to you that the times have changed and these people are still stuck in 20 years back in history. And they haven't followed what's happening in the region, or they don't want to accept that their influence is in the region is dying, right? And the reports that indicate that the U.S. occupation forces will withdraw from Iraq and Syria is also one more evidence for that. So I don't really understand this type of people, really. And now the foreign policy, they published what the intelligence community told to Biden, and they put 3 options how Biden could respond to Iran. And option 1, strike inside Iran. In keeping strikes against Iranian proxies limited to ensure that military tensions in the Middle East didn't escalate, the Biden administration actually allowed Iran to set the table for further escalation. And some former US military officials are insistent that comprehensive strikes inside Iran itself are the only way to send the message to Tehran to knock it off. The second option, strike against Iran's assets. Not everyone believes in the need to strike inside Iran for the United States to reestablish deterrence. Nathan Sales, a former State Department coordinator for counterterrorism during the Trump administration, said that there is a long track record of the United States telling Iran to curb its provocations by striking high-value Iranian assets in the region. Cells pointed to Operation Praying Mantis, the Reagan administration's April 1988 campaign of strikes on Iranian vessels in the Persian Gulf after a guided missile frigate hit a Tehran late mine days earlier. And more recently, he said the January 2020 U.S. drone strike that killed Iranian Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani and Popular Mobilization Forces Commander Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis at Baghdad airport was enough to get Iran to mostly back down from a tit-for-tat campaign against U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. Option 3, diplomatic rearrangement or re-engagement. The Biden administration started its term in office with a determined diplomatic effort to revive U.S. participation in the Iran nuclear deal after then President Donald Trump exited the pact in 2008. Even when those talks dried up until Hamas's attack into Israel territory last October, the U.S. administration believed that diplomatic efforts to normalize ties between Israel and the Gulf states would put the Middle East on track for an untold era of peace and prosperity. Now, some experts believe that the calls for U.S. military retaliation against Tehran risk derailing the Biden administration's efforts to find a diplomatic solution to end the Israel-Hamas conflict and de-escalate tensions with Iran. And they are urging the Biden administration to take a step back from the red button and a step toward the bargaining table. Ripple effects. Is there a risk to the Biden administration going too big or too small? What is just right? No one foreign policy talk told that the Biden administration was considering large-scale strikes on Tehran or something that would take out Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Some worry that going too big, striking inside of Iran, could put the U.S. into a hot war with Tehran. Others insist that the price of inaction is even greater. Miller, the former U.S. Fifth Fleet commander, said that without striking Iranian soil, the United States is likely to continue to see Iranian proxies target international shipping in the Red Sea and choke points such as the Bab el-Mandeb and the Strait of Hormuz. And while others think that Iran can be deterred without U.S. strikes on its soil, there is still a high risk of a U.S. response that is seen as feckless. So, guys, those are the options that Biden has on the table. Striking Iran directly on Iranian soil, striking Iranian assets, probably hitting some of its vessels, striking or assassinating an Iranian official, or the third one is diplomatic rearrangement. Which one do you think the United States will take? If you ask me, I think the United States is not in a position to attack Iran directly. There is no way for them to attack Iran directly. They shouldn't. If they have any sanity left in Washington, D.C., they shouldn't attack Iran directly. And they should, if I was an advisor, I'm saying, if I'm a neocon advisor for Washington, D.C., I would recommend my administration to strike some of its assets in the region. If I'm going to establish deterrence, which is not going to be the case anyways, and I'm going to prove to you into this at the end of this live streaming. I think the United States will strike some of the assets or what they call assets of the Iranians in the region, and they will claim that they have established deterrence. But they have to find an important asset. Sorry that I'm trying to sneeze. This light on my face, I always feel like I have to sneeze when there is light on my face. I don't know why. I was reading this analysis or tweet on it's by the Iranian Observer, and I think they have close ties to the Iranian government, or I don't know. They publish lots of articles or analysis close to the Tehran. They say the United States won't strike Iran for the following reasons. Iran is already a nuclear threshold state capable of producing several warheads with its stockpile of enriched uranium. The Pentagon has never won a war simulation against Iran, Millennium Challenge 2002. U.S. assets, military bases, and its 50,000 troops are sitting ducks in the region, as Iran has thousands of precision ballistic missiles. The United States knows that an all-out war against Iran will open up new fronts in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, also known as Iran's Ring of Fire in the West. The price of oil and gas could rise, which could devastate the European economy and the global economy. I don't think they care about that. Unlike the invasion of Iraq, none of the countries in the region will allow their soil to be used against Iran, which could result in the destruction of their infrastructure. I believe this is correct. I don't think the Saudis or the Qataris or Bahrainis or the Emirates will allow Americans to use their territory to strike Iran. I also think that Iran has a leverage over the United States in the region in terms that the United States has 50,000 troops in the region and they are considered as sitting ducks. They don't have the same defensive capabilities like the Iranians because they're sitting in their country, unlike the United States. And lastly, I don't know if this is true, if Iran is already able to produce several warheads of nuclear weapons. I don't know. But if this is the case, I think those are enough reasons for the United States not to attack Iran directly. And as I was reading what could be the response of Iran if it's attacked directly, Elijah Maginier, who was our guest on Syriana Analysis, says Iran informed a third party that any U.S. attack against its territory, even without human casualties, will be met with a direct response against U.S. forces in the Middle East. So, how can the United States establish deterrence against Iran, guys? Because this is the reason why they are trying to hit Iran, right? The reason is that they want to establish deterrence with Iran. And I will just a second. Okay, let me see. So all this discussion in Washington D.C. whether we have to hit Iran directly or we have to hit the assets of Washington, etc., etc. Everything is just about deterrence. This is the mentality that if they strike Iran or its assets in the region, then Iran will be deterred and they will ask its friends in the region to back off and not to strike the American forces in the region, etc., etc. So, unfortunately, I was reading this article today and I added lots of highlights, and now the highlights are gone. I will just quickly add some highlights for you because it's important. Let me just see again if I can restore the highlights. Yes, now I restored it. Finally, perfect. So this is an article published today in The Cradle by a former Indian diplomat, Mahadra Kumar. I quoted him a few times in the past live streamings. He says, swarming the US in West Asia until it falls. Deterrence in defense is a military strategy where one power uses the threat of reprisal to preclude attack from an adversary while maintaining at the same time the freedom of action and flexibility to respond to the full spectrum of challenges. In this realm, the Lebanese resistance Hezbollah is an outstanding example. While the Yemeni resistance movement Ansarullah is comparable to Hezbollah in certain respects, it is the audacious brand of defensive deterrence practiced by the Islamic resistance of Iraq that is going to be highly consequential in the near term. The situation is untenable for President Joe Biden politically in his re-election bid next November, which explains the urgency of the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Friday and Saturday in Thailand to discuss the Ansarullah attacks in the Red Sea. U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby explained Washington's rush for Chinese mediation. Quote, China has influence over Tehran, they have influence in Iran, and they have the ability to have conversations with Iranian leaders that we can't. What we have said repeatedly is we would welcome a constructive role by China using the influence and the access that we know they have. I mean, if the Americans kept their nuclear deal with Tehran, they would have themselves negotiated with the Iranian side and not send or ask the Chinese side, right? So that's why I said they're just shooting themselves in the leg. And they're the ones to be blamed. This is a dramatic turn of events. While the US has long been concerned about China's growth sway in West Asia, it also needs that influence now as Washington's efforts to reduce violence are getting nowhere. On Friday, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad chaired a meeting in Damascus for commanders of the security apparatus in the army to formulate a plan for what lies ahead. A statement said the meeting drew up a comprehensive security roadmap that aligns with strategic visions to address international, regional, and domestic challenges and risks. Certainly, what gives impetus to all this is the announcement in Washington and Baghdad on Thursday that the US and Iraq have agreed to start talks on the future of American military presence in Iraq with the aim of setting a timetable for a phased withdrawal of troops. They're going to do the same thing in Syria. So Bashar is meeting with his security team to put a plan for the day after the Americans. Iran's patience has run out over the US military presence in Syria and Iraq following the revival of ISIS with American support. Interestingly, Israel no longer abides by its deconfliction mechanism with Russia and Syria. Clearly, there is close US-Israeli cooperation in Syria and Iraq at the intelligence and operational level, which goes against Russian and Iranian interests. These developments are a vintage illustration of defensive deterrence. The axis of resistance turns out to be the principal instrument of peace for the issues of security that entangle the US and Iran. One can detect the outline of a practical solution to the Syrian stalemate that addresses the inherent security interests of the US and Iran that are embedded with an outer ring of US-China concord over the situation in West Asia. Russia may seem an outlier for the present, but there is something in it for everyone, as the pullout of US troops opens the pathway to a Syrian settlement, which remains a top priority for Moscow and for Putin personally. So when we read this article, we really come to the conclusion that it is Iran and its allies in the region which established a deterrence against the United States. Yes, the United States can hit Syria because they have forces there, and Syria lived a devastating war, 12, 13 years war, but they cannot strike Iran. Therefore, even now, if we see if you remember what General Wesley Clark said, that in 2001 or 2002, this was the video was from, that they're going to knock out 7 countries in 5 years, right? And most of the countries on the list were already hit by the United States, except for Iran. And I think no sane person should call for war with Iran. And I think there are still some people left in the United States who are calling against that, which is good, among the journalists, among the intelligence community. And therefore, the deterrence that Iran formed in the region with the cooperation with the allies and also more external powers such as Russia and China. And if this leads to the withdrawal of the US troops from the region, this will, in my opinion, liberate the Middle East from American hegemony that is strangling the people in the region through sanctions, through military force, through domination, subjugation, name it. So it is a good news if the Americans are going to withdraw from Syria and Iraq. It's good news for the Iraqi people, good news for the Syrian people who suffered a lot in the past decades due to the American regime change wars, the proxy wars, turning neighbors against each other, etc., etc. One of the people who is lately, but since the Ukraine war, I was following him more closely. Jeffrey Sachs was so correct on the U.S. foreign policy and very critical of the U.S. foreign policy, and rightfully so, in my opinion.
Why is the United States entering every one of these wars, trying to overthrow all of these governments and failing every time? Of course, I think the aim is wrong, but the failure is what is so incredible. The United States states a goal, say that it's going to transform Afghanistan. 20 years later, trillions of dollars later, complete failure of the U.S. objective. Similarly, in Syria, the United States tried to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. It created massive war, massive chaos, complete failure. It tried to change the government in Libya. It created civil war. It pushed NATO into Ukraine. It's created an open bloodshed. So I asked the question, what's going on? Why aren't these authors of this terrible policy long gone? The answer is, this is big money. This is big business. You mentioned the defense budget of nearly $900 billion, but there's a lot more defense, or I would say military spending. In addition to that, we have $300 billion on top of that in veteran spending. We have another $100 billion roughly in the so-called intelligence agencies. You add it all up, it's nearly $1.5 trillion. Big money, powerful interests, big companies like Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman. These are the military industrial complex companies, and a Congress which lives off of these companies for their future jobs after they're in Congress, because they go into these companies or they go into lobbying firms paid for by the companies, or their political campaigns are paid for by the companies. So we have a business operation which is a disaster. It's extraordinarily expensive. It creates havoc around the world. It does not promote any real interests of the American people, but it's driven by money, by campaign contributions, and by lobbying.
I hope one day my YouTube channel will be good enough for Jeffrey Sachs to come to my channel. I would really like to have him and document some of the main, let's say, events in Syria. He was one of the first American, let's say, analysts or people who have ties to the American administrations or have contacts in the American administration who spoke about Timber Sycamore before it was leaked to the press. I think the Syrian war deserves to be documented by people who have overseen what happened in Syria, and they have very good contacts in the US administrations, successive ones, who could tell the full story about this. The Syrian war has to be documented, and this is one of the reasons why I created Syriana Analysis. And I wanted to document this war, you know, for the people in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they could have a channel to go and listen or read what I have said about this war that is not mentioned and included in the mainstream media outlets. And that's why also this is one of the reasons why I created Syrian Analysis, to bring you guys content like this one. If you appreciate live streaming like this, like I'm doing almost every day nowadays, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the like button, and become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen. It's patreon.com/SyrianaAnalysis. I invest all the support that you give me, guys, in software, in hardware, in my living, of course, and also gives me the privilege to stay independent and continue creating content like this and even better ones. It's very important for us to have independent journalists, because were it not for the independent journalists, so many of the facts and the truth would have been buried under the rubble by the people in positions of power, and we wouldn't have known so many facts and crimes that they have committed against their own people and against us in the Middle East and in different regions of the world. So thank you guys for watching today's live streaming. I'm going to make another one tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central European time. Until then, if you're an American, say no to the war with Iran and say no to any type of war, whether it's in the Middle East or with Russia or with China. Let's build bridges between each other and among each other and create a more peaceful future for us and for the next generations. And I wish you all peace, and I will see you tomorrow. Salam.